Today's guest is a true legend and pioneer of mixed martial arts, a UFC Hall of Famer and the first ever champ to hold titles in both the heavyweight and light heavyweight divisions. Beyond the cage, he's also made his mark in Hollywood as part of the iconic Expendables franchise, bringing his fighting spirit to the big screen. Ladies and gentlemen, Randy, the Natural Couture. Straight out the rock today, we are joined by a legend.
Indeed.
The man they call the Natural, the legend, Hollywood star, and the first ever champ in the UFC, plus much more titles.
You forgot
Couture.
extremely good looking.
Oh, well,
You know?
that part too. Randy Couture, welcome to the Straight Out the show, my friend. My man.
I appreciate
It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you as well.
Yeah, we've had a little walk around the gym.
Yeah, very cool to be in the lair.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome.
It's great to have you here. Of course, you know, I'm no stranger to your place as well. Extreme Couture, been there many times. My daughter trains at the gym as well, and many of the athletes train here. Eric Nixick has brought the whole tribe in.
The whole tribe.
As I said, there's a lot
The
of
whole tribe.
It is a tribe.
yeah.
Sure.
As I said, there's a lot of closet bodybuilders in fight world.
Don't keep them waiting for the bench press, I'll tell you.
Yeah. yeah. Well, listen, we're gonna talk about a lot of different things. I think for us kicking off the show, obviously we're gonna talk about the legacy in MMA, but for a lot of people, maybe the newer generation, the first Randy Couture experience is going to be maybe in Hollywood.
Yeah, it's interesting how that has shifted. You know, obviously I retired from fighting in 2011, which is 13 years ago now, going on 14 years ago. And it's been interesting to watch the shift from fighting and, oh man, I saw your fight, I loved your fights, I love your fight career, to man, I love your movies. And
Yeah.
it's been a really strange thing to see that transition in the last 10 years or so.
What is the main movie people recognize you in?
Expendables is certainly the biggest property I've been involved with. That first one was the #1 film that summer. And then obviously 2, 3, and 4 have all done very, very well. That cast is ridiculous.
The cast itself is literally
Savage Row.
Yeah.
savage.
We'll talk about a pinch me moment.
Right.
Being in Rio de Janeiro for the first scene when the entire cast comes together. We're synchronizing our watches to go into this tunnel and lay all these bombs to blow this palace up in the movie. And we're looking at each other, and you could feel the buzz with the cast, with the crew. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it's-
like, oh my God, can you believe all these guys are in the same movie?
Do you like walk in the room? Obviously, a bunch of legends, but then like in your mind, you're like, man, I could beat all these guys up.
you never think it. You know, you just don't look at things that way.
Right.
You know,
When you
I guess the only time I really had that thought, I was at a pro basketball game. This is back when I still lived in Oregon. Nate Corey's a good friend of mine, obviously from the Team Quest days, and he had a sponsor that gave him 2 courtside tickets to a Trailblazers game, and we're sitting on these seats like fish out of water. Like, what are we doing here? This is so weird. But that Scottie Pippen was playing on the team in Portland at that time, and I'm sitting there looking at him, literally 6 feet away from me on the court, and I'm like, man, one leg kick, and that dude is gonna fold up like the cheap lawn chair right there on the floor. I don't know why that thought crossed my mind, but it did. I'm just looking at this guy like one leg kick. If he's done.
I feel like you have to you get used to sizing guys up a little bit, right?
Well,
It's like-
if Scottie Pippen didn't know that, he certainly does know now. He's like, thank God
I
it
would
didn't
have never
happen.
done that, but that's just what crossed my mind.
Yeah.
he might actually deserve a leg kick. I hear he's a notoriously bad tipper.
Oh,
No tipping Pippin, they call him.
no
wow.
tipping
See, I've
Pippen.
never
No
heard that
tipping
before.
Pippin.
Another useless fact that you can take into the World Cup today. But going back to that Expendables, the first time you got that script, did you know these guys were going to be your co-stars, or did it come in time?
Well, I got a call from my agent, said, hey, Sylvester Stallone wants you to stop by his office. He has a project he wants to talk to you about. And of course, that's not a
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah,
Right off the rip.
Okay,
Right, Tuesday call.
where and when? You know, that's not one
Did
you're
he
going to
say
blow off.
Sylvester Stallone or like Rocky wants to meet with you in the office? Yeah.
And so I show up, of course, and I had met Sly a couple of times before in other settings. At the Arnold, when he had his supplement line in Stone, at R1 down in El Segundo, you know, Rico's training facility there. He was shooting a big cover for his wife's book, her fitness book, and I happened to be training that day with our Russian friend there, and Sly's like, "Hey man, would you write a little blurb or a forward for my wife's book?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to do that, man." So I wrote a little forward for his wife's fitness book, and
It's awesome.
so we had a rapport, and he obviously he's a huge fight fan.
Yeah.
So he calls and says, "Hey, can Randy stop by? I want to talk to him about this project." I show up. Obviously, the casting director is supposed to show up too. She's late. So him and I are just sitting in his office like this, talking, and he's telling me all about the project. And he had originally written the script, and Hail Caesar was supposed to be Wesley Snipes' role. And Wesley was having some issues
Yeah, he
at
was.
that time. And so he was going to rewrite that role for me, make me a college-educated guy who rants about his ears and quotes Nietzsche and all this stuff. And this was the conversation we're having. And now the casting director shows up, and she's rushed, and she's nervous because she's late to this meeting. She comes charging in, and she bumps this bookshelf that he has right inside the door of his office. And it's got all the little action figures from all his movies. And the Brigitte Nielsen action figure from Gombreti falls off the top shelf and hits the floor. He's like, "Oh, hell, where were you a couple years ago? I could have used you." And we just fall out laughing. And of course, we put it back up on the shelf, but that broke the ice. And he explained this role. And then a week later, he gets Terry Crews to play Hail Caesar, which was perfect fit. And I thought, well, man, I'm out. He writes Toll Road into the film based on our conversation that day. And I was like, man, what an honor that he thought that much of me, enough of me to go back to the script and write this new character in to keep me in the movie. So I was very honored that he did that.
And it's continued. No.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Four. I think I got more screen time in 4 than I've gotten in any of the others. And it's been amazing.
Yeah.
I imagine there must be a lot of protein on set, right? Like you got a lot of big dudes. Everybody's
bars. He's got those bars, those weighted bars. He carries those around on set, and he's constantly rolling his wrists and pumping up his forearms and working out on set.
That's Sly's doing that?
Yes. Oh yeah. Sly's
I go to a pool party here. I'm doing 100 push-ups in the bathroom before I can go out there, So you guys all hitting it, working out, right before certain scenes. Like, that's like a thing, right?
I mean, people do that for sure, and I think that's why Sly has those bars on set, on his chair, so that he can stay pumped up when he's on screen. Saw a lot of the guys in the gym. Saw Arnold in the gym in Bulgaria. We're in the Kempinski. We work nights, most of those films. So we get off in the morning, go straight to the gym, get your workout in, go to bed, get a few hours sleep. Then you're up getting ready for your next call time to come back and work that next night. So
That's dope. So you got to lift with Arnold?
just in the same gym at the same time.
Okay.
I didn't really lift with him.
I think it's together. Yeah,
You tell every yes.
exactly. We worked out together.
Nobody knows detail.
He might have been working out over there, but we were both working out.
Yeah, we were
together.
training. And let that myth then continue into whatever. I see
in the
Randy out
ether.
benching him.
Let it happen.
Yeah, Randy smashed him in the gym. I didn't say that, but I'll keep it. So with the movie world that you've now been exposed to, is there a certain role that you would love to play in the future that maybe not stereotypical to what you've done already?
I've always been a fan of the Western genre. I grew up on all those spaghetti Westerns with Clint Eastwood. I've been a Clint Eastwood fan since I was a young kid. Loved those movies, grew up on those movies, would love to be in a film like that, in that genre. I've done one Western with Michael Jai White, Outlaw Johnny Black, but it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek, more of a comedy, even some musical numbers in that one. And it was fun. I had a good time doing it. But and I played a kind of post-Civil War scene in a Curse of the Clown Motel where I played a cavalry guy that, was a colonel that was slaughtering Indians and creating this curse, basically.
Kevin Costner's been crushing a bunch of these
Yeah,
Western type
Yellowstone,
movies.
and-
Yellowstone,
and
something like that
The new
would
one
be
he's
really
got
cool.
is really good too. I just watched
Yeah.
that on an airplane. It was
He's killing it, man. He's been doing it for years, but one of those
Dances
two.
with
I
Wolves
I
was
see.
an amazing. What an epic film Dances with Wolves was. And,
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Told from a completely different perspective and a very, very interesting film.
Is it a
Tyler Sheridan.
Yeah, Tyler
Dude,
Sheridan.
everything that dude touches.
He trains you.
And
He comes into the gym.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he's very you know,
I met Mo Brings.
He just opened a steakhouse too, Flex, over at Wynn.
I went.
Yeah.
I went.
I haven't gone yet.
It was really good. Yeah.
We got to get in there. We got to get that beef.
Better go because I think it's a temporary setup. It's not going to be there forever.
Okay.
It's kind of a test maybe, but it's very good. The steak was amazing. Using his ranch out of Texas for the meat and obviously Four Sixes sponsored a couple of my events. I do the Border Brawl in St. Louis for the foundation, which is a wrestling event, and I've met some of his folks from Four Sixes and
Border Brawl
with beer. Yeah,
like that.
Take all the best wrestlers from the 5 bordering states in Missouri and match them up against the best kids in Missouri. So it's a great outlet for these high school kids to show where they're at. It's on Flow Wrestling, so the college coaches can recruit and watch these kids compete. It's a really cool event. Dave Mercatani's a friend of mine for a long, long time, and he organizes that event every year.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was just there last month, and it was really cool, really fun.
Kind of a nice little segue into what we've got coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got the Operation Knockout. It's our 13th year doing this, so it's round 13 with Tough Enough. Partnered up with Tough Enough. Obviously, my son fought for Tough Enough. A lot of our young amateur fighters come through Tough Enough. Ronda Rousey fought for Tough Enough.
It really is the farm league, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a great place for these young athletes to get matched up properly so they're not getting in over their head. They get a chance to show their wares and test themselves out and see exactly where they're at in this sport. No amateur sport existed when I started this. My very first fight was a UFC.
No.
So, yeah, UFC 13. My very first.
I didn't know
fight.
that.
I didn't know.
And I fought twice that night. It was a tournament back
Yeah,
then.
you
Now
won both
there's
of them.
amateur ranks, and guys can, my son had 7 amateur fights before he ever went pro, and so he had a pretty good idea where he was at, technically, tactically, condition-wise, psychologically, how he was going to deal with the adversity of walking out and up into that ring or cage, and Tough Enough has done a great job of matching these fighters up, which is not an easy thing to do. So we paired up with them 13 years ago. They dedicate that show specifically to my foundation, my 501c3 for wounded combat veterans. All the proceeds, the big silent auction, all that stuff will all go to the foundation. Yeah. I think last year we raised about $45,000 for the foundation. So it's been a very, very big one.
And the motorcycle ride too, right?
Yeah, to date, after 13 years of Operation Knockout, we've raised $611,000 just to that one event.
Wow,
so they've done an amazing thing for the
give a hand for that.
Incredible, absolutely.
And from my side, because I've been supporting the events for many years now, and one thing I always wanted to point out is, sometimes with these organizations, you don't always see the direct effect of the money and how it affects veterans, like specifically, and. Randy, in the way in which he runs the organization, he goes and cuts checks to families, and it's a very emotional, powerful thing. And, I appreciate all the work you do for the guys and gals out there who need it, because there's a lot of them.
Thanks, Jake. There is a lot of them, and we have to link arms with as many small organizations as we can to try and help as many of these men and women as we can. Uncle Sam's not getting the job done, and the more of us that help each other out, with no ego, just help each other out, the fewer of them fall through the cracks, and it's that simple. We know the stats, 22 a day looking down the wrong end of their pistols. It's not right. So we've got to change the narrative. We've got to give these guys, these men and women, some support and help them through this transition. It's the right thing to do. So
yeah, Operation Knockout. Obviously the money that's generated there, and with the motorcycle rides, and the foundation, obviously, like legacy, I would think, you're in the legacy phase of your life, right? How important is that to you to give that back?
It's huge. It's a huge piece of my journey. 19 years old, I took that oath and wore that uniform for 6 years. It was a Cold War then. There wasn't anything going on. So I did all that training, took the same oath that you took, and never had to put my butt on the line. Unlike many of these men and women now since 9/11, have been fighting the war on terror and putting themselves in harm's way and doing what Uncle Sam has asked them to do. And then they come back here and they frankly, they get shit on. They don't get taken care of, and it frustrates the hell out of me.
Both of you guys.
I went in 06 to Iraq. Spent 12 days on the ground with Rich Franklin over there. Went to 6 different FOBs. Met a bunch of soldiers just like me, wearing that same uniform I wore, putting their butts on the line and doing all the things I trained to do and never had to do. That was a stark experience for me, to be over there in 129-degree heat, pouring water down my gullet so I didn't, drop dead of heat exhaustion, and wearing the flak jacket and the steel pot and the whole deal because we had to. And man, it was an eye opener for me.
Yeah.
And then in 07, I got to go to Walter Reed in Bethesda and tour we did at the Fisher House, which is their version of the Ronald McDonald House for caretakers, wives, moms, fathers whose loved one is in that hospital getting fitted for a prosthetic or getting surgeries to get back right, to then be processed out of the service and go back to being a civilian. And there's where I heard the horror stories. Walk the wards for the first time and meeting a bunch of these men and women fresh off the battlefield and hearing the woes. Like, man, my mom's car's been in the parking garage with a boot on it for the last 6 months. We can't afford to pay the tickets, and she can't drive back to work. We're going to lose the house. Yeah. I mean, I'm like, what? How in the, I mean, talk about a kick in the gonads.
Yeah, and another thing I'd like to point out is
go
that,
out and start this foundation.
But even on the website now, you know, people who are struggling can go to the website and get assistance. Yeah. You know, this is something that's really important.
The new way, we've created a portal there that any veteran that's listening to this anywhere, doesn't matter where you're at, doesn't have to be in Las Vegas. We got vets all over the country now. Go to the portal, provide me your DD-214. Show me those bills that are on your back that you can't get rid of, and we'll pay those bills off and take that stress out of your life. Now, I'm not just going to hand you cash. I don't want to enable you to continue to self-medicate and adrenaline seek, because that's what we do.
Indeed.
But I will definitely take that stress out of your life, and that's been a big, big step up in helping a lot more vets across the board. The MVP database, because we're in 9 cities with MVP now, all those connections, all those vets in all those cities now have access to Extreme Couture GI Foundation, xcgif.org, and that portal is there. Any of you can go there. And if you need some financial assistance, we'll help you.
That's amazing. I have a couple friends personally that went into the program, and you've assisted them. And so it's amazing, you know, helping people.
Yeah.
It was what it's all about.
J-Rock was telling me some stories, probably like a couple of weeks before the bike ride that I came up and supported. I didn't have a bike, unfortunately. All you guys
I've been
took
trying
off
to
and
get
left
him.
me there.
I've been trying to get him on.
Wait a minute. I'm on the back of one of these things. They just left me. Randy was going. This guy was trying to kick.
I was like, we could rent a sidecar and we could do this up properly.
I'm not sure anybody wanted you shifting the gears there, Flex.
But he was telling me some of the stories, and then some of the people that I got to meet that were on the receiving end of some of these checks, and beautiful stories where you've gone into hospitals, you've gone into people's houses, and you've just changed their life in the most meaningful way, just by, you know, you using your platform to create the foundation and just pool people together. And I'm going to ask this question because maybe some of the fans that are watching this don't understand what you guys were talking about. What you both have served. I never went that route, unfortunately. I got failed on flat feet in the last stages of going into the military. So that was my military.
You're a rugby player. You're great.
Yeah, well, I was going in as a rugby player too. But you guys obviously have served, you've seen, you've come out. What is it that truly kind of frustrates you? To say one of the reasons why you started your foundation. What are the gripes you see?
I mean, not these guys not able to get the care that they need in a timely fashion. They're waiting months and months with the VA for treatment, to see a doctor, to get things set up so they can even begin the process of healing. And then obviously the first thing that the medical institutions want to do is slap an opioid or an antidepressant on top of that, and we all know the side effects of that. They're banning plant-based medicines and a lot of other modalities that are better and more effectively treating these people in the name of just getting them out the door and getting them out of their face. It seems to me what's frustrating is that they would rather see us kill ourselves than give us the support and the things that we deserve after taking that oath and putting our butts on the line.
I've also seen that they've cut veteran funding specifically for the migrant crisis and the things that are going on like that. And obviously we're living in a weird world right now.
Yeah.
You know, and we're looking at a possible war right in front of us. And that for me is really scary, and understanding that we already have this problem that exists with the last 20 years of wars. And it's like, you know, I don't want to go down that road again.
The system's already overwhelmed. They can't keep up.
Yeah.
And that's why foundations like mine exist, because we know at some point we've got to take care of our own. We've got to step up and do the job that's not being done. And that's what's frustrating.
But people don't see the pain behind the family and what happens to those guys. It's not just them. It's their kids.
The divorce rate is ridiculous.
Yeah.
The suicide rate we've already mentioned. and we've helped out plenty of families who've already lost their service member to suicide. Those family members still count, and they still count on the books as far as I'm concerned, as far as the foundation is concerned. And we've handed checks to those women, even though their service member's already gone.
Yeah.
Because they're all one unit. They're all part of the same group and the same people that have all endured what that oath means.
And at the ride, Naya, she had lost her boyfriend and her dad, both service members, in a very short period of time, and Randy helped her
was a unique
and help
situation,
that family.
and I had no idea why she melted down when we
Yeah.
called her out, and didn't know what she was dealing with. And you never know what somebody else is carrying around. So do your best to be nice, for crying out loud. It's just a smile, but little did it cost. Hand those smiles out. Tell people you love them.
Yeah.
Help them out. I mean, that's what we're here to do. Vibrate at a higher level and help each other out, love each other, take care of each other. And certainly an affinity for guys that wore the green, guys and gals that wore the green. I'm going to bend over backwards to try and help those people. They took that same oath I did.
It's good, man. I mean, I really appreciate it, and we need more. We need more of this, obviously. As you see the political, and not to get too political, right?
Oh, here he goes.
Not to get too political.
When you set the tone, like you know, say somebody, I'm not.
But I gotta.
No offense, but somebody goes in with no offense, but I'm about to offend you, right?
It
Not to talk about
pretty
politics.
easy to do.
If I
these
start with
days,
but,
It's true. It's true. Carry on, bro.
Well, we got an election. We're a week out of an election. I think it's probably, we could probably agree it's a really important election, maybe one of the most important elections we've seen in our lifetime. We're into conflicts right now with others brewing. There's a lot of issues in the country, different politics that are being carried out, our border, all these things. And obviously, there's got to be some things there that you're seeing that you're not appreciating or you want changed, right? And so we're going to the voting box. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, you don't have to tell me who you're voting for, but I could guess.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a very touchy subject, and still doing studio films, so I keep my head down and my mouth shut. But anybody who digs in and knows who I am and where I came from knows that I'm a conservative, that I believe in this republic and this Constitution and our Bill of Rights. That's what separates us from everybody else on the planet, and has been the bastion of hope for a lot of folks on this planet for a long, long time, and that is certainly being challenged. The Patriot Act, in many ways, changed America forever.
No more privacy.
Under the guise of what happened in 9/11, and a lot of information come out now that it appears to have been an inside job, and with motives. And every war we've ever been in has been a banker's war. Why are we not at war with Russia right now? Because we're as connected as they are. And we can see through the lies and some of the misinformation and crap that's out there, and that's allowed us to be drug into those situations that we shouldn't be in.
Yeah,
That's one of the things. Are more than capable of handling the Palestinians and Hamas themselves, and Iran for that matter. And anyone with a brain knew what was going to happen the second those funds were released to Iran, and where that money was going to go, including the IDF. So why would they be surprised when those guys come over the border and do what they did? That's a terrorist organization, plain and simple. So wipe them off the planet, that's fine, but not at the expense of genocide in Palestine and the Palestinian people. That's the truth of the matter. It's a very, very difficult situation. You can't criticize anybody there without being called and labeled certain things. That it's not about that. We don't,
Exactly to that point, because I love all Americans, whether you're voting for whoever you're voting for, we're all Americans, we're all in this together. Obviously there's different viewpoints on how we think the country should move forward, but we can all look at things and agree, there's certain things not working, right? So it's how do we stop fighting amongst each other? How does it, you see the media narratives that kind of happen, and I feel like it's hard for an average person to understand what's real, what's not real at this point.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it all depends on who you're around, and you just take. I've just done this. I've taken everything that's been said, and then I digest it myself. You know, I'm old enough and mature enough to make my own decisions up. I'm not a sheep. There's things I agree on, things I don't agree on, but we can all agree there's no win when you talk politics with anybody, right? There's always going to be something or somebody that's going to come after you, you know, because your opinion doesn't
Jive with their opinion.
Jive with theirs. So it's kind of like that lose-lose, whatever you want to talk.
There you go.
And, you know, even my mum in the UK, for example, all the BBC over there is the complete opposite of what we're hearing over here. It's just whatever can be picked apart and put on TV. So there's a skewed version of, you know, what's really going on over here. Not through my eyes anyway, you know. So I speak to my mother. She's always trying to change my mind. It's like, I live here. You stay in the UK. That's going to shit right now.
But I mean, there's some problems in the UK too that we're seeing here.
bro.
It's everywhere. It's not
Everywhere.
just here, and we don't get to see all the world news. But like these immigration problems are happening in the UK. I mean, we were just talking about you had some of your boys like, you know, keeping guys off the streets. It's like it's happening everywhere. So, you know, there's a bigger problem out there that, you know, hopefully we get some daylight
All
here.
seems to be part and parcel of the same plan and agenda. Breaking down the sovereignty of all these European countries, breaking down the sovereignty of this country with the open borders and the mass influx of migrants. It seems to be part of a plan, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that. And there's a lot of people that don't agree with that position or don't see those facts laid out. But there seems to be a plan here.
You're a business guy. I think you should just take a ring to the board and you wanna come in here, fight it out, duke it out. You wanna prove yourself?
Got a new TV show.
Yeah, I know. That's it. Segue into the ring. My gosh, where do we start with this?
He's got a lot in the ring. He's got a lot in the ring.
Like, again, we just mentioned that your first fight was a professional fight. UFC 13,
UFC
correct?
13,
You
correct.
fought twice in one day.
Yeah, twice that.
I mean, can you take us back to that timeline and you going into that UFC 13 and knowing you're going to potentially fight twice that
The
day?
journey started a long time before that, honestly. I'd heard
Yeah.
what a great wrestler my dad was. My dad was a deadbeat. He was never really around most of my life. One of the reasons I love to hunt to this day, because the only times I got to see him, he would come take me out of school and take me hunting, take me out in the woods to chase deer or elk. But I'd heard my whole life what an amazing wrestler and what a tough guy he was. So it's somewhere in my young mind at 11, 12 years old, I turned out for the wrestling team, thinking maybe I'd get his attention. Maybe he'd come around. Never saw me wrestle a match in my entire career.
Wow.
And I found the place where I seemed to flourish.
Well, you were the natural.
Those coaches were very important. Coach Casebeer, Coach McAvoy, Coach Winter, you know, all those guys. Those were the guys that filled that void that my father left, my dad left, and so they became very important. Those friends, that seemed to be the place I flourished. Yes, walking out in the middle of that mat in the compulsory uniform of that era, which was a pair of tights and a singlet. Now there's real courage for you in front of all your peers to potentially get your ass pinned. I mean, that's where it started.
Yeah.
Learning to control that internal dialogue, learning that I'm going to get out of this exactly what I put into it. The work ethic and all those things that were indigenous to that sport of wrestling then translated to fighting at some point down the road, much farther down the road. 96, I was exposed to the UFC for the first time. One of my athletes brought this VHS tape over from Oregon State. I was coaching at Oregon State, and we all lived in the same apartment complex. I said, man, check this out. And it happened to be Don Fry.
Oh.
Who I went to college with at Oklahoma State. My freshman year was his senior year in college at Oklahoma State. Wow. He was a heavyweight. I was the 190-pounder. We were two of the only three athletes on the whole team that were married, so we all hung out together a lot because we had wives. We weren't going to the frat parties and doing some of that other crap.
Strip club.
So, and Don and I were good friends, and here I see him in this cage fighting this dude. Like, dude, what is that? And was immediately intrigued and saw the application of years and years of wrestling, wrestling training and mindset. And they're going to pay me what? I'm like, oh my God.
Sign me up.
I definitely want to try this. And then in 2007, I had a friend that put me in, filled out the application, sent it in with some wrestling video. Said, we got enough wrestlers, but we'll put them on our alternate list. We want more exotic martial artists right now. So I'm on the alternate list. This is 96. 97, spring rolls around. I'm getting ready to go to Puerto Rico and wrestle for the U.S., representing the U.S. on the Greco team at the Pan Am Championships. And I get a call 3 weeks before I'm supposed to leave. Hey, you're on our alternate list. We got a heavyweight tournament in 3 weeks. Do you want to fight? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want to fight. Let's do this. Had to get it past the head coach. I was the assistant coach at Oregon State. And he said, well, if the athletic director's okay with that, I don't like it. I think it's bad for wrestling. I think it's bad for this university. But if the athletic director says it's okay, then you can do it. The athletic director thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Guy sounds like a hater.
He went nuts. He thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So off and going. I fight in UFC 13. 2 fights that night. It was a tournament. I win the heavyweight tournament. So
2 fights in one night.
yeah.
2 fights.
Talk about that real quick, because 2 fights in one night, ladies and gentlemen, right?
Yeah.
The old school Iron Man.
It was a tournament format, and they had cut it down. It used to be an 8-man bracket, and you fought 3 times. Those early days with Hoist, and they fought 3 times in one night.
It's wild.
They cut it down because you didn't always get the best fighter that made it to the finals. Guys got hurt and got injured. You had alternates and other substitutes in there, or a guy went in and fought injured and didn't fight up to his capability either. So they started shifting and moving away. They narrowed it to a 4-man bracket. So I fought twice that night. Then shortly after that, they did away with the tournament format altogether. And we started running towards regulation, running towards rules. There were very few rules in those early shows. 4 rules. You couldn't bite, you couldn't eye gouge, you couldn't fish hook,
Punch in
and
the
you
nuts.
couldn't groin strike.
All my favorites.
Especially that groin strike.
Yeah.
That's his fucking signature move.
Joe, what was that Korean kid, that fighter? Joe Dong. He got just hammered.
Oh,
Yes, I
That
remember.
video.
Yeah.
Makes your butt pucker every time you see
oh
it.
my God. Yeah.
True pioneer, though, and
Absolutely.
also when I think about it, like, you were really the first dominant wrestler, right? And I feel like wrestlers at that time, it was like this emergence. It was like jiu-jitsu, everybody's talking about that, and all of a sudden these wrestlers just started dominating in the UFC.
It was Hoist Gracie, obviously, and nobody knew what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was. And here's this 170, 180-pound guy literally tapping out and choking out these huge guys. And the kryptonite to that style was wrestling. And, Fry, Coleman, Severin, those were the OG first 3 real
Kevin
wrestlers.
Randleman.
Yeah,
Randleman,
Randleman. There was a bunch of us. Danny Henderson, Matt Lindland, myself. There's a whole plethora of us guys that kind of migrated from the wrestling world into this MMA world. And, real raw team, real American wrestling with Rico Chiapparelli. That was the team me and Dan Henderson and Matt Lindland, a bunch of us were on that team. As we saw, he had the wisdom to see the direct application of years of wrestling ability in this cage and how to make our mark there. And that was what he set out to do, is show what real wrestlers were all about. And
Do you ever see, or do you ever look back and think, wow, the UFC, PFL, Bellator, they've all evolved right from them early stages. Do you think to yourself sometimes it's like, wow, I was fighting as, I would say this, your legacy right now in looking back and the evolution of the sport of MMA in general, could you ever imagine what it looks like now, back then?
yeah, I think it's been amazing to see the sport explode, to be a small part of that journey into the sport opened up, and people, shifted from misinterpreting who we were and what we were doing. They thought we were criminals. So somehow we were just going to grab them and bite them or kick their ass right there. And it was very interesting. And so it was an education process. And they used guys like me that came from Olympic caliber wrestling to educate people about the sport, and that we weren't mindless. It wasn't a mindless
Human
rage
dogfighting,
game. Yeah,
right? It's like, I remember the
cockfighting.
and all
Cockfight,
that.
they used to call it, yeah.
Yeah. So and so there was this education process in that period, and we ran towards rules. They started implementing unified rules. There was almost a new rule every show back then. So it was really interesting. It was interesting to be involved. Interesting to see the sport gain popularity and gain mainstream attention as a legitimate sport. And they were using guys like Tank Abbott, who was a reputed barroom brawler.
I used to love watching Tank.
This
man.
bar,
Yeah,
off
it was
this
fun.
bar stool and punch you in the face.
Yeah.
That was kind of their motto and their moniker back there, and that wasn't being very well received, frankly. And it wasn't really until the Fertittas and Dana White bought the brand, because the brand was struggling, that they were able to fashion it in a way and run towards rules, create unified rules, which happened just before they bought the company, but they definitely took that to a whole new level, going to rounds, going to a system a 10-point must system, which we're all used to from boxing, and kind of gravitating towards those combative sports that we already knew that were widely accepted everywhere. And I was used to, say in some of these meetings, you take all the combative sports that are in the Olympic Games and you roll them up into one, and you have mixed martial arts. This is what we do. So, it's been an amazing thing to see. Used to be go to some of these casting calls, had the same management as Boss Rutan and Kevin Randleman and Rampage Jackson, and
all the OGs.
They saw that the next action star was going to come out of mixed martial arts because there's an authenticity and a physicality there that we bring to these roles. And so they would start farming us out to these meetings to meet these casting directors and stuff. Me, Rampage, and Boss would be in the same room, and guys would cut, used to be, oh my God, you're one of those cage fighters? Like, wide-eyeing us like we're going to somehow come over the table and get them. And then it shifted in 04, 05. We'd go to those same meetings, and guys would come from 2 floors up. Oh, we heard you were in the building. Can we get a picture with you? And I was like, oh my God. It's amazing how things have changed.
Yeah. Is this going to help me get the part?
In perception.
So obviously for yourself, Randy, you're known for getting into the sport at a later age, even though 33 is not, old in any shape or form. But when you've gone through the career you've gone through with the wrestling, 3 NCAA championships you've won, when you won the Olympic alternative too?
An alternate on the team 4 times, from 88 all the way to 2000. That was the one goal I didn't achieve in the sport. I didn't make the Olympic team. I made the world team and wrestled in the world championships on 4 occasions, but in 4 Olympic trials, I managed to come up short. And in 92 and 96 especially, I was the #1 guy in my weight class. Everybody expected me to make those teams, and I managed to step on it and lose in those final matches. So, again, I think everything happens for a reason. I lost those matches. I think if I'd have won those matches, made the team, and won my medal, I would probably be a wrestling coach somewhere right now. I would have never forayed into MMA. That fire was still in me because I didn't achieve that goal. And now I saw this application not only to make a great living for my family and establish some generational wealth there through the sport as a professional athlete, but the direct application of most 30 years of my life as a wrestler fit right into this sport. It was a great place to jump off. Now I had to learn all the other stuff, but that was the fun part. And so I jumped in with both feet, literally on a whim. And within 3 shows, 4 fights, I'm wearing a world championship belt. I'm like, what the hell just happened? How did that happen? It was crazy. And I got into a rhubarb with the old owners, SCG, and over their contract because they were experiencing the huge backlash politically from Senator McCain and others that were speaking out against the sport and calling it human cockfighting and all that. So they got us canceled off People's Choice, the pay-per-view carrier. So now they were struggling financially. Here I signed this new 3-fight deal for great money, and then they're like, we can't pay you that. I'm ready to defend my title. Here it is in black and white. This is what you need to pay me. No, I'm sorry, we can't pay you that. And I said, well, I'm ready to fight, but I'm going to fight for the amount we just spent weeks negotiating for. And they said, oh, well, you choose not to defend your title, we're going to strip you of the title. And they started a heavyweight tournament, and that's how Boss ended up becoming the title. Him and the Randleman fight happened in that tournament, which was a classic, iconic fight between those 2 warriors. Guys I know very well, both of them. So ultimately, Kevin eventually came back and won that title. I ended up coming back to the UFC and fighting Kevin for the heavyweight championship.
What was the duration in time between you vacating your title and then coming back?
A year. Yeah.
Were you active?
I was wrestling, trying to make the 2000 team, basically.
Oh, wow.
I was in the finals of the Olympic trials again and lost to Garrett Lowney, who went on to win a bronze medal in the Sydney Games. And I knew at that point it was time for me to retire from wrestling. So I hung up my shoes, put my boots on the mat that day in Dallas at those Olympic trials. And then I could focus solely on fighting and not juggle both of those, wrestling and fighting at the same time. So.
Did you have boxing? Sorry. Yeah. Did you have any boxing background, or did you, did that start?
It's a common misconception because of UFC 13. They said, oh, he had extensive boxing training in the Army, and that wasn't true. I would have done anything to run in formation in boots. So volleyball, yes, sign me up. Boxing, I'm in. Sign me up for the boxing smoker at Fort Rucker, Alabama. I did 3 weeks of training, go to the boxing gym instead of running in formation, and then didn't get a match in the smoker. So I did that 3 weeks of boxing training to get a match in that smoker, and then didn't get a match. So that was my extensive boxing training that the announcer said at UFC 13. So everybody thought I was a boxer. I'm like, what are they talking about?
I'll take it.
Yeah. So I knew I had to learn the boxing, especially in that second fight against Vitor. He was smoking everybody. Jab, cross, jab, cross, jab, cross.
So fast, too.
Very, very
Powerful.
explosive. I think UFC 13, he fought Trey Telligman on that card and literally beat him up in 60 seconds.
Smoked him.
Yeah. And he did the same thing to Tank in the next show.
Yeah.
And Vanderlei.
Yeah.
I think it was
that
before
was
that.
later.
That was,
Vanderlei was later
that's
after
right.
that. I was already the champ when the Vanderlei fight happened. I watched that fight too. But he was smoking everybody. And that's who, after my tournament win, they wanted me to fight him in the super fight. And the guy who won that super fight was going to get the title shot against Mo Smith. Mo had just beat Mark Coleman. Leg kicked him to death until Mark couldn't stand up anymore. And
Good old Maurice Smith.
Yeah.
I remember that Vitor fight. You had him in a clinch. You just uppercutting him, looking for up. Oh,
Dirty boxing.
dirty boxing.
Dirty boxing.
Born that night. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention that because that's what, if you go online and you do some research of Randy, dirty boxing is next to the name of yours. And like you just told the story now that your boxing extent was 3 weeks at that point in time, of course.
Yeah, well, I definitely went and found a boxing coach to get ready for that Belfort fight because he was smoking everybody. And Scotty down at Boxing Works in Hermosa Beach and Tony, who was a great kickboxer and a stunt guy. Me and Tony ended up working together in a couple movies after that. But those guys helped me shore up my boxing to get ready for Vitor Belfort the first time I fought him. Here's this southpaw that was a black belt in jiu-jitsu and literally crushing everybody with his hands, just blasting through everybody.
Fast.
And so I knew if I could get my hands on him and not get punched in the grill, I had a chance to wearing him out and making him wrestle me. And that was our goal, was get my hands on this guy and make him wrestle me as much as I can in this fight.
Tire him out.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
Was it a ritual that you had going into each one of your fights? There's something that you used to do, or superstitions?
A lot of, not superstition, but I did have the same plastics. When I cut weight, I wore the same clothes, the same gear. That's how you know exactly how much water weight you lost. It's a regime. So I know I'm sweating, getting my stuff on. By the first 10 minutes of that walk, I've already sweat out 1 pound. I had it calculated. So if I'm 9 over, I know it's going to take me 90 minutes. Once I get dressed, it's going to take me 90 minutes to sweat out this water and be down to weight. And I had it dialed in to literally the ounce. I could time it perfectly. I knew exactly the sweat coming up my pant leg.
He's like, I know.
Exactly.
This is a pound.
I've lost 5. I got 3 or 4 more to go. And I just, through that regularity. Visualization. I had a huge visualization routine that I would do every practice in that camp. Camps, the sweet spot for me tended to be about 10 weeks. 12 weeks was too long, 8 weeks was too short. As I got older and then later in my career, I became more active. I shortened my camps to 8 weeks. I didn't need a full 10-week camp because I was just bouncing one camp to the next. There wasn't no downtime in between. So you refine, dial in what you need and how you feel both physically and mentally. All those modalities, massage therapy, my chiropractor, acupuncture, all those things were part of that camp.
New school
The
stuff.
psychological skills that it takes to deal with the adversity of walking out of that tunnel and up into that cage. So practicing those mental skills, framing, visualization. I saw that fight hundreds of times before I ever walked out of that tunnel. With the one common denominator, it was me getting my hand raised at the end of it. He could throw the kitchen sink at me in those visualizations, but it was always me being victorious. That's what I had to picture and program myself, prepare myself to experience. Yeah. And that's what most people don't recognize. You control that internal dialogue. It does not control you. So many people are a slave to that voice in their head. And that voice says things that nobody in their right mind would say to your face and not expect to get punched in the mouth. And that's the truth. You control that voice. That voice does not control you. And so many people miss the boat there. And so getting it to say the same things that come out of your conscious voice get that subconscious voice to say the same things. And man, you're going to be a force to be reckoned with when they're both in line and they're both saying the same thing. Especially when the pressure gets turned up, that internal dialogue starts chirping. What ifs? All the what ifs come in. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if he does this? What if the ref does that? All these things you can't control. So learning to give those affirmations and make that voice shut up and recite those affirmations. And I had to write those on 3x5 cards in the early days. And eventually you don't need the cards anymore because you know them by heart, and you can reprogram that voice to say what you needed to say to keep you on task and keep you doing exactly what you trained to do and go out and execute. Smile and go out and execute.
You're a big, well, we're a big mindset guy in this podcast, and obviously you are a big mindset guy. Would this be principles that you start putting together on that 10-week camp, 8-week camp? And are you then, as the fight is coming closer, are you more aggressively having that visualization, or is this something that's being prolonged throughout?
It starts as soon as I know that's the guy they want me to fight. And I start watching the video. And I go from the oldest video to the newest video. How has he progressed? Where did he win? Where did he lose? Where did he like to be? Where did he seem not to like to be? Where are his strengths and weaknesses? And there's where my team comes in. Guys like Eric Nixick.
Right.
Shout out Eric.
Aren't going to
Love you, Eric.
Aren't going to blow smoke up behind him. They're going to be honest and say, look, this is where he's really dangerous, where he beat this guy and where he wins here. So
Such an important relationship.
We need to
right?
prepare tools and sharpen tools for you to stay out of those situations or be able to address those situations if you should happen to fall into that situation. If Tito takes you down, you've got a problem. 96% of his fights, he won from that top position, dropping elbows on guys. So it boils down to not conceding that takedown and allowing him to get the position where he has the most success.
Right, and then spank his butt.
Well, could have never in a million years imagined ending up in that circumstance with 45 seconds left in that fight, but it happened. So, but again, you know, you sharpen the appropriate tools you believe you have to solve the problem. It's problem solving. That guy across the cage poses a significant number of problems that you have to mentally and physically figure out how to solve. And so sharpening the appropriate tools, hoping you get that combination right and you're able to go out there and execute those things. You keep that internal dialogue in line. It doesn't undermine your confidence. You're not out running sprints the week of the weigh-ins because what if I get tired? And then you wonder why you don't have your legs under you on Saturday night because you listen to that voice and we're out in the parking lot running sprints instead of having confidence in your plan and sticking to your guns.
Yeah.
I mean, all those things are a factor, and a huge piece of athletics is mental. And what I wished I'd realized is that a lot of those same mental skills apply to my everyday life, not just my athletic life. I could have probably saved myself a couple of divorces. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
We're not going to go down that road. I know you said nothing's hold, but off the record, but we won't go on that record. There's obviously a few ex-girlfriends that would love to throw me under the bus too, so I'll move away from any of them ex-relationships. But just fast, quickly, and I want to dive into this. In the cage, when you're fighting, you obviously mentioned like that guy across the cage has got, excessive amount of tools that he's going to use on you. Your job is to make sure that you have more tools than that person. In the fight, are you just in flow state, or are you consciously reminding yourself to be present, or is it? And if so, what kind of tactics do you use?
The goal is to be in flow state. In the heat of the moment, in an action-reaction sport like mixed martial arts or wrestling, you don't have time to think. That opportunity to execute that technique happens in a split second, and if you're not already in the motions of executing that technique, that moment passed and you've missed it. So you're absolutely trying to achieve that flow state, the mushin in the Zen world.
What's it called?
Mushin. Everything slows down. You see everything that's coming. It's a crazy state of mind.
Yeah.
But when you get in that flow state, that's what that flow state is. The Zen call it mushin.
Yeah.
I have that tattooed on my side in kanji.
It's a real thing too,
So
right? It's like like everything slows down.
Is it a fight in particular where you just had that flow state and you were like, oh my gosh, I'm
Absolutely.
Matrix style?
I've had some amazing encounters in that flow state where everybody was like, what the hell? How did he do that?
I got goosebumps thinking about this.
It's wild. And that's absolutely what you're trying to achieve. And again, controlling that internal dialogue, not letting that chatter go on and undermine your confidence, having all those things firing on the same cylinder, seeing that success, visualizing and preparing yourself physically, because those pictures you put in your head, you will have a physical response to.
Amen.
I do this all the time with people. Make them close their eyes and visualize that lemon. And you see your hand come in and slice that lemon, and the two halves of the lemon open up, and you can see the segments and the clear juice and the pulp, and it's running out on the counter, and you start to smell that lemon.
I'm gonna close my eyes doing this with you.
And now what? Your mouth is starting to pucker, and you can open your eyes. I don't see any lemons in here. You just put that image in your brain and had a physical response to that picture. That's how powerful that is. And it's the same thing with me visualizing that fight and seeing myself walk out of that tunnel and walk up into there and execute especially that first encounter, that first engagement, because that gets the momentum going your way. And then it's action reaction, and everything that you've trained to do unfolds right in front of your face. It's an amazing thing to experience.
Is there a particular fight that you know, is your favorite fight, or you had that flow state, right? You know,
Yeah, there's three that come to mind immediately. That first Belfort fight, nobody gave me a snowball's chance in hell of winning that fight. He smoked everybody. I think he had 6 fights to that time and an aggregate time in the cage of about 3.5 minutes.
he was like a Mike Tyson
Just
in the UFC.
blasting through everybody.
Right?
Young and hungry.
And I knew if I could get my hands on this guy and hang on to him and make him wrestle me and literally hang around his neck like a weight, he was going to have a problem. And that's exactly how that unfolded. And nobody gave me a chance to win in that one. The first Chuck fight, again, everybody was sure Chuck was going to knock me out. And I made friends with that eventuality, that was a possibility. But by God, I was going to go down swinging, and I was hitting him first. And that totally threw him off. He never got in the groove in that fight. And the second and third fight, what happened? He changed his footwork. He changed the way he approached me because of that. It made it much more difficult to get bearing on him. He was a moving target instead of that stationary target that he was. He had those long levers and that unique, innate
Reach.
ability
Yes.
to catch you right on the end of those things. And I had to make friends with that's exactly what he was going to do. And there's a damn good chance he might catch me. So make friends with the worst possible outcome and go out and do exactly what you trained to do. And it worked.
Can I ask you that? I know we go one
Tim
more.
Sylvia fight
Yes.
was the third.
The third,
And again, 6'8", Mutton Jeff in the cage, been retired for 13 months, going through the divorce and all that, and came back for that fight. Nobody 43 years old. Everybody's like, this guy's out of his mind.
I was jumping out of my chair.
Oh,
in
I
that
think everybody
fight,
was.
dude. When he landed that right hand, it was like,
Practice that left inside kick to break Tim's balance, to
down.
bring his head down,
Yeah.
overhand right, left hook. And he disappeared for the left hook. I was as surprised as everybody when he fell over.
that was huge.
We were talking about that. I don't know if you were on this episode, but me and Eric were talking about that particular fight on one of the episodes him and I done together. Eric has been a co-host on the show a few times. Co-host when we brought guys like Strickland in, because we need to have a little
buffer.
conformity. Because Eric will be like, okay, and Sean's like, okay, yeah.
I love
if
Sean.
there's anybody that can control Sean, I think Eric has a slight advantage there. But that's so impressive. Like, I'm 40 right now. I'm 41 in November. And the thought of me getting back onto a competitive bodybuilding stage is crazy. You got to go through the whole process. More than anything else, it's the mind change, because there's such a journey to getting back on stage in my world. But I have to start believing that I'm going to win that Mr. Olympia long before I've even touched a weight. And that process is so far behind me right now, because obviously I've gone through the stages, losing weight, killing the ego off, because again, otherwise it's that next competitor that I've got to beat and face on stage. For you, 43 years old, getting back into the octagon, facing the current champion, how hard was that for you to get back into that routine and training again, and get into that mindset?
It never left. So it wasn't like I had to, I was still even though I stepped out for 13 months, there was other stuff going on. I was going through a divorce. I was in a rhubarb with the powers that be, Dana and company, over contracts and BS. But that fire, that hunger in me and what it took to walk back up into that belt, I knew what I had to do. And I also knew Tim pretty well. Tim came and stayed with me for 3 weeks in Oregon at Team Quest. Stayed in my house and I liked Tim. Tim and I were friends, and we're still friends to this
Yeah.
day. But I knew Tim psychologically was one of those guys that had to do this to put his own mind in the right place, have that animosity and that anger between whoever he was fighting, so he could go out and do his job. And he was going to have a little trouble because of our friendship, garnering that same energy with me. I knew psychologically that was going to be an issue for Tim. I'd also spent 3 weeks on the mat with Tim training, and so I kind of watched him progress all the way to Rico when he won the title, and was in there cracking dudes and knocking out Cabbage, literally.
Yeah,
out
he was
there to
crushing for a
take
while.
Yeah, he
guys.
was.
And I saw that mentality change in him. He started fighting not to lose instead of going out there and fighting to win, which is a completely different mentality. Then there was the Andre Arlovsky, Tim Sylvia show for about 5 years there. It was them back and forth.
Yeah.
And they knew each other so well. And some of those fights were like watching paint dry. They didn't engage. It weren't very exciting. So I watched this change in Tim. I knew Tim tactically and technically. And psychologically, I knew he was going to have an issue doing what he needed to do in a fight against me. We had worked on that first engagement, that left inside kick to break his balance and bring his head down. Yeah. And man, did that work like a charm. And then again, once that momentum's going your way, it's going to take something pretty drastic from him on his side of things to get it to swing back his way. And he never got in the groove. He couldn't make it happen.
But again,
Biggest crowd we've ever had in North America at that time, over 22,000 people in nationwide in Columbus, Ohio. It was a crazy crowd. I'll never forget that last 10-second countdown. It was amazing.
that is that something you miss? The crowd response?
No. It took me a good year to come to terms with walking away from the sport when I did. The James Toney fight was that camp. For whatever reason, every old injury I'd ever experienced through wrestling and fighting flared up in that camp for no particular reason. And that was the first time that little voice in my head started saying, hey, maybe that's your body telling you it's time to do something else. Mm-hmm. And I think once you start having that conversation in your brain, that's something you have to take very seriously.
That's hard to fight.
Especially is the nature of this sport, where you're literally putting yourself in harm's way to try and solve those problems that guy poses. So once that little conversation started happening in my brain after that camp, I knew I didn't want to go out on that fight. I wanted a real fight. So not that he wasn't a real fight, but that was more of a gimmick fight, boxing versus MMA, the whole thing. And I was honored to get the nod. I think they were originally
it was interesting.
at Chuck for that. And they thought, well, Chuck might be silly enough to try and stand up and box with James Toney. Yeah. We know Randy won't do that. And I honestly think that's why I got the nod.
Yeah.
Was because they knew I would wrestle him. I wasn't going to try and box with him.
Yeah, UFC wasn't trying to lose face on that one.
No, there was a lot of
They're like
forth on that.
Well, in Boston, I mean, that was an amazing place to fight. That crowd in Boston was ridiculous. They are sports crazy there, and so
Dana's hometown. He's like, don't you go out there and me. Not in front of my hometown.
Yeah.
Speaking of Dana, I've heard there always hasn't been like the best relationship there, and I don't know if that's because you're integrated with the PFL, and essentially like it's a competing league.
Dana had issues with me because I held their feet to the fire over their ancillary rights and their crappy contracts. When they bought the company in 2001, I had just signed to new management. Jeremy Lappin and Peter Levin, the same guys that were sending me out on all these casting calls because they believed the next action hero was going to come from the MMA world because of that, like I said, that authenticity and physicality. And so they understood what those ancillary rights were, and what that meant to me is when they bought the company, I was the heavyweight champ, and I was due after one more fight to sign a new contract with these new guys that owned it.
Right.
And we took them to task over those ancillary rights. Why should I give away all those ancillary rights in every category in perpetuity forever?
Yeah, it's tough.
That means if I wanted to write a book or be involved in a film like Expendables or
They're taking a
whatever,
cut.
be in a video game, I would have had to have asked their permission to do those things, and they would have wanted their cut of that.
Yeah.
I get owning the fights that I'm in that they've created a platform for. That's fine. But all this other extraneous stuff, why would I give that stuff away?
Right.
That's silly.
How has it changed now? I mean, is it still similar? Because just the fans.
It hasn't changed. Obviously, the class action lawsuit has just been approved by the judge. We were hoping for injunctive relief. Money's great, and the $375 million is a lot of money for 1,200. What was originally 1,200 fighters in that class for the league class, but the real goal in this 10-year process with these big class action firms was injunctive relief. Create some transparency in our sport and change the way that this company has to do business. Now, the most direct way to do that is to get the Muhammad Ali Act amended to cover all combative sports athletes, not just boxers. That act was passed in 1996 to protect boxers from promoters like Don King and Bob Arum. The commissioner of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, who was the #1 commission in the U.S., was Lorenzo Fertitta when that act was passed in 96. So when 2001 rolls around and he gets the opportunity to buy this new fledgling sport of the brand of the UFC, he knows exactly what he's looking at as far as creating a stable of fighters that he can then exploit, sign to these 17-page crap contracts, and basically keep them to a minimal amount of the take from any single event. The fighters are taking 13 to 15% of any single event in the UFC home.
No.
All the rest goes to the promotion. Their goal is to keep the athletes under 20%, and they've done that very, very well at 13 to 15%. Show me another sport in our society where that's the case. The athletes that are putting their butts on the line are taking that little amount home. There isn't one.
So,
Everything's at least 50%. Boxing is 60 to 75%, depending on who's fighting on that card. So there's a huge issue in our sport with transparency and making.
It's a prevalent issue too, right? It's like we see a lot of this being talked about. Even though he's in the sport, he's not in the sport, right? But he's in the sport. Jake Paul he's been leading.
Paul's
that.
been
He's
doing these
pushing a lot of
crossover
stuff.
boxing matches. You guys that from the MMA world, like Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, Anderson Silva, and those guys made more money from that one crossover boxing match than they ever made in MMA. And Jake Paul is poking Dana in the chest about fighter pay. John Jones stepped up, Francis Ngannou. But back when I was taking them to task over this stuff in 01 and 06, nobody. I was the only one chirping about it. So
I'd be pretty scared to
nobody
rock the boat.
Nobody wants
Rock the
to
boat.
be, yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the Kurt Flood. I mean,
Right.
what Kurt Flood did for baseball is exactly what needs to happen. You need these top echelon fighters to step up and be willing to put their careers on the line to force the companies to do business differently.
You are obviously involved with different leagues. Obviously, you've got your own we just spoke about, but then PFL is big with yourself. And how long have you been with PFL?
7 years now.
7 years.
Yeah, they're a fledgling new organization, but they've exploded. Obviously, we just absorbed Bellator and the 215 fighters that Bellator had. Surprisingly, they kept that brand intact and put that as the umbrella and kind of the pay-per-view model over the top of the global season where I work. And then we've created these regional feeder programs, PFL Europe is just finishing its second season. PFL MENA, which is Middle East and North Africa, is just finishing its first season. You're going to see PFL Australia and PFL Africa come online next year as these feeder programs into the global season, and then the global season into the pay-per-view model, which is right now still Bellator and the Bellator champs. So obviously Francis just fighting in that big championship against Renan Ferreira. And that was our first kind of real official big pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Was an amazing card and amazing fights. I'm not sure how the pay-per-view did. I suspect it probably didn't do that well, unfortunately, because I think we need it to do well. But at the end of the day, we're still experiencing some growing pains. This company has just grown so fast. That keeping up with it and doing things the right way and taking care of the fighters the right way, which is what they set out to do. They created a meritocracy. It's not about talking smack or publicity stunts. It's about going in that cage in the global season and certainly in the feeder programs and scoring criteria point and ensuring that you get into that playoff and then that championship at the end of each one of those seasons. And then once you've elevated yourself that way and become a world champion in a feeder program or a world champion at the global level, now you move up into the champs versus champs and the pay-per-view model at the highest level. That's how it's set up. And I love that global season, that meritocracy. If you want to talk smack, talk smack. But it's not going to get you anywhere. You still got to go up in that cage and score points.
Back it up.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
got to back it up.
So,
I got a number of friends that fight for PFL and Bellator overseas. They love it. They have incredible relationship with you guys over there. They said that some of them have come over from the UFC and have found their new home. They speaking, no names mentioned, but they truly said that they feel like this is the organization that they wish they had in their books from the beginning, because it's just a different experience. So I don't know what you guys are doing differently over there, but seemingly
we're doing our best again to create that meritocracy. It's all about how you fight. It's not about all this extraneous other stuff, and giving the fighters a voice and how they're regulated. We have a athletes advisory board, and me and Ray Lewis are on that board. Now, I wish that was more active. They've created that, but we haven't really used that. But at least the fighters are having a say in how they're paid and how they're regulated in the rules that are installed. Oh, wow. They want to bring elbows back, especially at that pay-per-view level, at the highest level. We're used to elbows technically.
I was say, where did elbows go?
It changed. We eliminated elbows just because we're asking these fighters to turn around in the regular season every 8 weeks.
That's right.
So the more cuts we can eliminate through elbowing, but they're getting cut anyway, and
that would take a lot out of your game, though.
Ground and pound. You look at Tito and so many of us. So we made a living with those elbows. So I have sharp, bony elbows, evidently.
You also gave you gave guys nightmares with those elbows.
The athletes want to see that rule and that tactic come back into the global season, because they're getting cuts anyway, and they're still able to make it to that next fight in 8 weeks. So what did we really accomplish by taking the elbows out? I think it was worth a try, and we're asking them to turn around and fight again 8 weeks later in the regular season, and then 8 weeks after that for their playoff. And so I think we'll probably see that rule change come back here in this next season as we close out our finals coming up in Riyadh on the 29th on Black Friday for the global season. Some great matchups. This new young gal from the UK, Dakota Ditcheva. She won the PFL Europe first season at 125. And she is just tearing people up.
Wow.
Muay Thai world champ 2 times as a teenager, and really developed an amazing MMA game. She's been fun to watch. But a lot of great fights on that final card coming up on the 29th in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. November.
Saudi, it seems like it's taking a lot of the big fights now.
Saudi is definitely taking over in sports in many ways. They have the largest sovereign hedge fund in the world. The PIF is $800 billion. They realize that their gas isn't going to last forever. Their oil isn't going to last forever. They need to create opportunities. See what's going on in Qatar. They see what's going on in Dubai. And they're the largest population base in that region. So they're like, this new king is like, why are we taking a back seat to any of these other nations? We should be building these opportunities for our population and our people. Everything's changed there. I was pleasantly surprised. I've been over there 4 times now in the last year and a half, to close the Mina deal, to go to the Fury Francis fight, the champs versus champs. I got to commentate that one. When we bought Bellator, we did a champs versus champs fight, and now we just had the big Nagano fight over there, and now I'm going back over for the 5th time here at the end of November. So long trip, but amazing. They treat us like kings. Literally, the food is amazing. Everything they're building hand over fist. I mean, there's cranes all over Riyadh and Qiddiya.
The architecture itself too is
it's remarkable.
It's beautiful, right?
It's really
so new.
It's almost sci-fi-ish. Some of it. It's really, really amazing what they're doing there. And women are now driving. Women are now going to school. Women are now in the workforce. The minister of sport for the entire country is a female. Before 2016, she was doing underground soccer.
Underground.
And if they'd have caught her, they'd have probably stoned her to death. Now, talk about cojones, right? So
True.
This new king's like, I'm making you the minister of sport.
Wow.
If that's the kind of backbone that you have. You're exactly who I need running sports. And
good for the king to see have that forward thinking too.
And Turk obviously is a huge boxing fan and a huge gamer. He's taken over boxing in many, many ways. A lot of these big boxing matches are being funded and taken by them. That's why the Francis Tyson Fury fight was over there. And it must have saw every top boxer for the last 3 decades at that show. It was a remarkable show, unbelievable. The arena was state of the art. Everything they did there was incredible. I spoke at a magnet school for judo and taekwondo. There were more girls on those mats than there were boys. So things have definitely progressed and changing there significantly, which is great to see.
It's great to see, I'm sure from your shoes from early days to see the progression of how many females now are coming into the sport at whatever martial art level.
Yeah. Well, fastest growing sport in our country right now in the U.S. is women's wrestling. They're going to have their own NCAA championship next year in 2025 for women's wrestling. There's over 38 collegiate programs now for women in college wrestling. So that
Incredible.
sport has exploded at every level, and we're seeing that across the board. On the international stage, our women's wrestlers are doing fantastic in the Worlds, at the Olympics. It's been great. Really, really.
Talk about a feeder market for becoming a fighter, also, right?
Yep.
All those, you're going to see a ton of those girls.
At some point, you'll see
over.
Bella Meir, Frank Meir's
Right.
daughter, who's wrestling for Iowa. She will be stepping up in a cage somewhere,
Yep.
using her wrestling prowess and martial arts prowess to become a world champion at some point. I fully expect to see that.
Yeah, she's a stud. My gosh, she's come to the gym with Frank a few times.
Yeah.
I won't say that she outlifted Frank, but she outlifted Frank.
Which is no small feat.
I would say Frank's hard to outlive, man. That dude is
Well, this is his daughter, so the apple doesn't far from the tree. Randy, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Truly, you are a legend and somebody that I grew up watching. It's a full circle moment for me, and something I left out early in the show. We met for the first time in Columbus, Ohio, for the Arnold Classic, and we somehow kept on meeting there every year. And surprisingly, if I don't say, you'll be shocked, it was at the bar.
Of course.
Upstairs at the Hyatt, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we'd always see each other there, whether you remember or not. But I would come up, introduce myself, and you're an unbelievable champion's champion, because you give so much time to everybody, and I seen so many people just waiting to say something to you, and you were sitting on your own, which is crazy, at the bar on a high table, just trying to have a drink or just have a break from working the expo. But you give everybody your time, mate. And I sat back and watched that from afar until I became that guy myself. I was like, I got to do this too.
I was literally just gonna say, like, that is exactly how that's exactly how he is.
Unbelievable, bro. But that's great for me to see that in the somewhat of my early part of my career, to see somebody that is done everything in the UFC, become the first ever champ, Hall of Fame in the fitness industry too. You just won that the award at the Arnold Classic, Hall of Fame award. But it was incredible just to see how much time you took with the fans, how engaging you were, because there's many people who don't have half the accolades that you do, and they kind of like, hey, let me sign something, no eye contact, but you give everybody your time, and that was incredible for me to see.
I appreciate that. I try to keep it simple. I love people.
People love you.
And the golden rule is the golden rule for a reason. You treat people exactly how you want to be treated. It's a pretty simple thing. Yeah. We as humans tend to complicate the hell out of everything, and it doesn't need to be complicated. But I try to operate from that position of humility in everything that I do.
I love it.
Start with humility, act with humility, end with humility. You meet so many people that, my motto is every single person I meet is better at something than I am. And if I approach that person with an open heart and an open mind, I have a chance to learn from that person. So I always try to start with humility, act with humility, end with humility. And that puts me in a position to learn from every single person I meet.
What a great life statement right there, right? Just
Definitely.
treat everybody you want to be treated yourself. And suffice to say, I've tried to do the same thing myself, from the humble beginnings of where I've come from to where I am. We all have them circle back stories where people have met you and may have become a success in themselves, and then remember that first time they spoke to you, whether you remember or not. But I'm sure you have many of them stories, as do I. But it's good karma too, right? It's
planting
good karma.
seeds.
Yes.
And most of us don't realize we're planting seeds. And we'll probably never see that plant, that whatever that seed was we planted, grow. Some of us will be long gone when that person achieves what that seed was that you planted in them. And I think that's the way you have to look at it.
Yeah.
Do your best to plant those seeds. Pay it forward. Fill your cup up and pour that cup out. Give it to people so you can fill it up again and give some more. I mean, that's how life's supposed to work, in my opinion.
Well, in wrapping up this podcast, when that day comes for us all and we get put into the ground, what is it that you want people to know and be reminded about?
I think just exactly what we're talking about, how you treat people, spread love, be uplifting. High tide raises all ships. Eric says that all the time.
Yeah.
So eliminate your ego. That's our motto at the gym. Leave your ego outside. It's only going to get in the way. And come in with an open heart and an open mind and treat people the way you want to be treated. It's not rocket science. And I tried to represent the sport with integrity. It wasn't about creating personas or any of that other stuff. I tried to keep it simple and be myself. And I think whether I won or lost, the fans stuck with me. They weren't fickle that way with me. And I think they appreciated that approach. So I hope they still see that in me. And that's what it's all about.
Well, rest assured, I don't think anybody has a bad word to say about you, my friend. Everybody I've met, and we spoke about briefly earlier when we done a little tour of the gym, it's incredible to hear what people say about you when you're not in that room. And suffice to say, you've done an incredible job throughout your career, and all the people that you've met on the climb, and all the people that are around in retirement that either know you from the Expendables or know you as the MMA legend that you are. But Rock, in wrapping up, anything?
No, just it's a pleasure having you here today, Randy, and also just to the folks out there, this Saturday, November 2nd, get out there and go to some fights, have some fun. It's for a good cause.
Or donate.
XCGI Foundation, or donate. XCGI Foundation.
XCGIF.org is the website. That's the portal for any of you vets out there that need some assistance, need some help. We can get you in touch with counselors, help deal with some of those wounds that are on the inside that are not so visible. We can help pay off some of those bills that are nagging at you and causing some stress in your life. So come see us. Come support the cause. If you want to support our veteran community, come to the fights on Saturday. Get in, buy a piece of art at the auction. Come watch some great amateur fighters get down and show their abilities, and at the same time support our veteran community. So I appreciate you guys having me on and allowing me to promote that and what we're doing and to talk about all this, man. It's great. And I love the Lair. The Lair is amazing.
Well, this is your home from home if I want to convert you into the bodybuilder. This guy is Benjamin Button. This guy could be seen on the Mr. Olympia stage. He only needs like a couple of weeks of training, right? A couple of weeks of boxing, done him well. A couple of weeks of bodybuilding, we'll get him back on the Olympia stage. But that all said, my friend, it's incredible. As I said, well wishes to everything you're doing and the legacy that continues to grow. And we will be supporting all the causes, including this Saturday and all the future ones that are going to be happening this year and next year. So this is Flex.
It's Rock.
And this is Randy, the Natural Couture. We are out.